Thank you, Otis. Thank you, Jeff, and everyone for inviting me to navigate this conversation. I'm very honored, Mayor Lightfoot, to have the opportunity to talk with you, especially in such a challenging, confusing, scary time. So I want to start with breaking news and get your reaction to the indictment of James Comey, the former FBI director. Let's just go right there.
We're going to start with an easy topic to warm you all up, and then we'll work up.
Well, and I think that you are such you will have such an interesting perspective on this because of your role as obviously the mayor of this major, amazing city, but also you led the Chicago Police Department of Professional Standards. You were the president of the Chicago Police Board. You've been a partner in a law firm, Mayor Brown. And so, you have this wealth of perspective, and you're now teaching also at like Harvard and Michigan, University of Michigan. So, we're seeing the weaponization of the Department of Justice in ways that we've never seen before. And I really want you to speak into what does the indictment of James Comey mean for the legal profession, for justice, for democracy, for all of it?
Well, it's obviously a very complicated notion, but what I would say is we should all be fearful of what's happening. Let's think, folks. It's the end of September. We're 9 months in, just 9 months in, and the fact that the President of the United States took to social media to lambast the Attorney General of the United States and direct her to prosecute a list of individuals, including James Comey. Saying it's without precedent doesn't even remotely scratch the surface. The other thing that I'm proud of as part of my professional life is I'm a former federal prosecutor here in Chicago. I served the Department of Justice for a number of years during the height of the crack epidemic. And candidly, one of the reasons I ended up leaving is because the then Attorney General was a guy that we may remember, John Ashcroft. And I thought he was crossing the line into politicizing what has to be a free and independent prosecutorial system through the Department of Justice. I look back now at what's happening here and now, and I look back on those days with John Ashcroft, and that was like quaint notion of things back then. Look, I'm no fan of James Comey, and I've been on record about that, and for a number of reasons I'm not over and probably never will be the recklessness in which he disclosed an ongoing investigation of Hillary Clinton like a month out from the election that no doubt had an impact. But for people who are doing their jobs, for people who serve our country, to then be weaponized and terrorized with a federal indictment, even if it lacks merit, is a horrible, dark day in our history. My former boss, the U.S. attorney that I work for, Pat Fitzgerald, is going to be one of Comey's lawyers. He issued a statement yesterday. I have no doubt that this indictment will not stand. But think about the damage to our democracy by the fact that it was even brought, the circumstances in which it was brought. But I will also say, President Trump, keep talking, because it's really hard to win on a malicious prosecution defense. But there's so much evidence that's already out there in the public domain that I would expect would be one of the first things that Comey's lawyers do, to file such a motion in front of the judge. And I hope that the judge will give it due consideration, because there is no other way to think about this. I haven't actually read the indictment itself, but I will. But what's been described is it's lacking in what we call a factual basis. It just supposes that something happened without providing the details. That in of itself is a potentially lethal defect in the indictment. But stepping back from all the legal wrangling, which will play itself out, when someone gets charged with a crime, it shatters their life, whether they're guilty or whether they're innocent. No prosecutor should ever take the act of charging someone lightly, ever, ever. You have to hire a lawyer. You got to deal with the reputational harm. You got to deal with what the consequences are for your family, for your livelihood. Like, all of those things get thrown up in the air when the federal government charges you with a crime. It is a huge deal and significant in an individual's life. Now, again, this is Jim Comey. He's not some anonymous guy or gal without means to fight against it. But this is a terrible thing for our democracy. And this president's out of control, as we can see.
Yeah, so, and what we're seeing in just the 8 months that he's been in office is that there are very few guardrails. Yeah. We're not seeing a lot of pushback. Somebody used the term anticipatory obedience. And what we're seeing, like law firms, we're seeing capitulation from, academic institutions, all these places that we would hope would mount some type of, strong defense for democracy. So, like, what is the recourse? Because this is just the beginning. Yeah. He's got a hit list. Mm-hmm. Hillary Clinton, Letitia James, Adam Schiff. The list is long. And again, like you said, these are powerful people who have resources. But what about, and then you look at people who don't have resources, who will not be able to weather this. Right. So what's the recourse?
I want to bring folks back to one moment in time. Towards the end of the Biden administration, Joe Biden issued a number of pardons for family members, preemptively. There's a lot of chatter about how is he doing this, why is he doing this, it's terrible, sets a dangerous precedent, blah, blah, blah. Well, was Biden crazy? I think not. Because you know that if his family members were not wrapped in immunity, that they would have been on the top of the list, including the former president himself. This is a dangerous time where a person who clearly has serious mental health issues, that has such tremendous power, is bending the tools of government to his will and weaponizing our government against us. It's not just the horrific policies that are going to wreak havoc on places like Chicago and Philadelphia. When you think about 10 million people by 2030 being without access to any health care, right? You think about the cuts to grants and block grants and other things that we have relied upon for decades to make sure that our inner cities are vibrant and strong. It is this thing, this in the silence of way too many people, that he is turning the government into his personal fiefdom and going after people who dare say anything. It wasn't just Stephen Colbert, it wasn't just Jimmy Kimmel. He is threatening the pillars of our democracy. Anyone who would dare say, no, the emperor, you do not have clothes, we are all at risk. But I will charge you and urge you, don't be silent. Don't stand on the sidelines. I'm still in contact with a lot of mayors across the country, and I'd love, frankly, I think some of the current mayor's staff is here. Please connect me with your mayor. I'd love to be helpful to her. And in the early days, after the inauguration, there was palpable fear on the part of local leaders to step up and say anything. And I'm mindful that we're in the season of the high holy days for the Jewish faith. And I said then, I'm like, folks, you can't put lamb's blood on your door and think that the angel of death is going to pass you by. It's coming. It's just a matter of when, not if. I am encouraged to see over these many months that people across the country have started to find their voice and have started to speak out. It's got to continue. And frankly, again, no shock, I'm a Democrat. We got to talk about the real harms to real people. We've got to talk about what is happening to the working man and woman, that the rug is being pulled out from under him, that the economy is being weakened, not strengthened. If we start talking about those things, the average person, unfortunately, because we abandoned teaching civics in our junior high and high school way too long ago, they don't get. And frankly, they don't have the luxury of caring about the pillars of democracy being destroyed. That's for us high-minded folks. But for people like my parents, my family members, what they care about is, can I pay for my gas? Do I have a job? Am I going to have access to health care? Am I going to be able to have a house? Can I pass on any savings to my kids? We have something to say about that. And unfortunately, right now, the answer is we aren't sure. And maybe no.
So let's kind of zone in to kind of the local level, because you were elected mayor. You had never run for elected office before, correct?
Correct.
So you won like kind of in a landslide in 2019. So you won 73% of overall vote, winning all 50 wards. But then you fast forward to 2023 and your re-election, and you did not advance to the runoff. You earned just 17% of the vote and became the first incumbent mayor in 40 years to lose a re-election bid. And so I want to see if you could reflect on why you won in 2019 and why you didn't win in 2023.
Another set of easy questions, right? I don't know, Sarah. I was liking you initially.
I knew that question wouldn't go over well.
No, I mean, look, obviously, I've spent a lot of time thinking about both. I think I won because in the classic Chicago parlance, I wasn't somebody that somebody sent. I didn't come up through the party ranks. I wasn't climbing the ladder. And I caught a moment where I think voters in this city were sick and tired of the same old, same old. But it's that same old that 4 years later kind of came back and did me in. You know, we faced, as you all know, chart the history of our country from 2019 to 2023, we faced unprecedented challenges. And while, yes, I won in a landslide, I won all 50 wards, it was this great moment of euphoria. That was in early April of 2019. We went back into the field in early June of 2019, and the glow and the buzz of the election was starting to fade even then. I mean, literally had been in office 1 month, and the numbers started going down, in part because, well, I think a number of reasons. One, it is really hard to be a female black leader.
Can you say, like, I mean, I understand that for sure, but I'm just wondering, for people who are not black female leaders, why is that?
Well, I mean, I'm going to say the game is rigged against us, right? There are not people who are out there cheering us on, supporting our leadership, even amongst, and sadly, among black folks, who are like, well, who is she? Because we have been acculturated to believe that leaders are a certain gender and a certain race. And any of us that break from that mold, even among the constituencies that we represent, there is a skepticism that you have the competence and the skill set to be able to lead. So I think that's an issue. And gentleman who did the introduction kind of alluded to this. The media is brutal. It's brutal. I don't know about Philly, but the City Hall reporting during my time in mayor was probably 20 different reporters deep, meaning from different outlets. Print, TV, bloggers, in today's world, everybody who's got a keyboard thinks they're a journalist. And journalistic integrity is optional many times. And the media landscape is really difficult and changing. Thank you. Right, the business model of old doesn't work. I don't think we've landed at what our new normal is. But when you have a hungry, skeptical group of media folks who are mostly white, who are mostly male, and don't understand somebody who looks like me and comes from the place that I come from, it was very, very hard to break through.
Can I ask you, just to insert something, because you're also the first openly gay
Yes.
mayor, so how does that factor into
I would say that was probably not as big a factor. Look, don't get me wrong, there's rampant homophobia in our country, and there are folks who were like, how did that happen, right? Because of the constituencies and the communities that I represent. I think the bigger challenge was being female and being black. It's not a dynamic where we are set up for success, unfortunately, which is why the bonding that we all do with each other is so important. But also, I was the first COVID mayor to run for re-election. Jenny Durkin in Seattle, where she faced, I think, the worst of any mayor in the country. Now, Ted Wheeler in Portland, Oregon might have a difference of opinion about that, but Jenny really faced a horrible situation there in Seattle. She didn't run for re-election. Keisha Lance Bottoms in Atlanta, similar challenges, didn't run for re-election. I was one of the first that was up. London Breed in San Francisco, who ran for re-election and wasn't re-elected. She was in our class. So I think in terms of why I lost, I think there's a lot of different factors. COVID upended our lives, and I think continues to, in ways that were just profound. The certainty that we had and the assumptions that we made about what today was going to be and what tomorrow was going to be, all of that got pulled out from under us. And people were fearful, they were scared, they became angry and frustrated. And I said to my team as we were running for re-election, we have to figure out how we pierce through the anger bubble. And we weren't able to. As violence escalated across the country, and Chicago is not immune from that, and carjackings really became a huge focus, which is such a deeply personal crime. Not that others aren't, I don't mean to diminish it, but when you're going about your business and you're on a city street and you stop at a light and somebody comes up and sticks a gun in your face, right, you feel that traumatization in deeply, deeply personal ways. And it was happening, unfortunately, on such a large scale in predominantly white areas of our city that had never faced any kind of violent crime. And we had a white guy that ran and played the race card very well, who convinced voters that I couldn't keep them safe.
Paul Vallis?
Paul Vallis.
Who was our superintendent in Philly?
Yeah, you remember Paul Vallis.
What's that? I'm sorry you didn't claim him. I'm not claiming him either.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But the dynamic was people were unhappy, they were angry, they were searching for solutions, and people think a big city mayor can do everything, and that's just not so. But saying, hey, that's not, we're doing all this, if people don't fundamentally feel safe, It's game, set, match, and that was a huge part of the dynamic, I think.
Yeah, and looking from the outside in, I absolutely think that the job of the mayor of a big city is a thankless job. It's a very, the day that you are elected is probably the best day.
Oh, 100%. It goes downhill. As I said with the polling, it just goes downhill from there. But it's also, I will say, the most rewarding job that I've ever had. I wouldn't change 1 second.
Well, I want you to talk a little bit about that, but I do want to go back to the racism, sexism thing, because we do have our first black woman mayor in Philadelphia, and I do see Philly and Chicago as kind of like sister cities because they're very democratic, they're very diverse, the leadership is diverse, and so I'm just wondering, like, based on your experience, what advice would you give Mayor Sherrell Parker right now?
I was going to make a joke based on the Eagles thing, but I won't do that. Look, I think we are in a different kind of crisis, but we're not in a crisis where people feel like everyone is afraid for their life. I would say take advantage of this moment to particularly reach out to people that maybe didn't support her, that won't support her, but try to build those bridges. I would say she's got to figure out a strategy for dealing with a hostile media, right, who I can see even from a distance are having fun with her. And then you frankly also got to be the producer of your own content for talking directly to voters. If you try to go through the press, it'll never work. You'll never get a straight shot. And so using all the legitimate tools of government, if you got a radio station, you got a TV station, social media obviously is absolutely essential, but you got to be out in community talking to voters nonstop. Filling up that well of goodwill every single day is absolutely key. Tough to do when you're facing a global pandemic. The surge of violence, well, even before that, the protests after the murder of George Floyd. But if you have that ability, as I think leaders across the country do now, even in the chaos and crisis coming out of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, you fill up that well of goodwill now.
So, Mayor Lightfoot, you mentioned the challenges you experienced with COVID and everything. Today, it seems like they're very different challenges, but the climate is so uncertain, it's so scary in very different ways, but there are similarities. And I'm wondering, for big cities like Chicago, like Philly, that are being threatened with the National Guard and with, this very punitive approach to democratic cities, how do you think Brandon Johnson is doing as the current mayor of Chicago? And what advice would you give to him if he would take it?
Well, I made a commitment, frankly, advice from your former mayor, Mayor Nutter, that I will not publicly say anything about the current administration. I don't think that, look, I ran against a guy, my views about and predictions were well known, but I don't think it's helpful for me to stand on the sidelines and be a person lobbing bombs in the middle of a tough situation. I really believe strongly, regardless of whether or not I agree with policies, views, actions, that we as a city need whoever is our mayor to be successful. And I repeatedly said to him, and frankly, the last time was on Inauguration Day when I'd said my part. We have a little transfer of power between the outgoing mayor and the new mayor, and as we embraced, and he was going up to have his moment, if you need me, I'm here. And the offer still stands, and we'll see if I ever get taken up on that. But I would just also say, backing away from the particulars of this current mayor and this current administration, we face similar challenges with Trump the first time around. The threats, the denigrating our cities, saying they're going to send in the National Guards. I mean, 2019 and 2020 were really tough times. In addition to what was happening with COVID, we didn't have a federal government that supported us. Quite the opposite. The federal government was our enemy. If you look at Trump's comments in 2020 about cities like Chicago, DC, Atlanta, other places, he named us as mayors by name, and he named our cities in the worst ways. And frankly, the death threats against each of us escalated exponentially. That was a big reason why some of my colleagues said, I'm out. I'm not running for re-election. It's a lot to take. But what I would say is advice in general. It will pass. You have to not forget your North Star, your core values. People in cities have a right to expect that mayors are going to deliver for them, even under the most challenging circumstances. And I don't think it's enough. And you see the potential 2028 contenders. I don't think it's enough to just be anti-Trump. You have to articulate a vision for what you're going to do. And if I had $1 for every time now somebody comes up to me and says, hey, I want to thank you for, oh, I just realized that you did, that and 10 cents doesn't get me a cup of coffee. But you have to keep persevering no matter how hard the circumstances are, because literally lives hang in a balance. Yeah, we're not facing a global pandemic that changed the advice, changed literally every single day, but lives are still hanging in a balance. If these cuts go into effect, the social service organizations, I'm assuming some of you in the room represent those folks who are doing the Lord's work every day, it's going to have tremendous impact. You're going to feel it and see it in the eyes of the people that you need to serve. I think this moment, if we don't just wring our hands, or if we're just not in the streets protesting, I think this moment provides an opportunity for unique collaborations that maybe otherwise wouldn't have existed, and innovation, particularly at the local level, that we're not going to see anyplace else because the situation demands it. Like, we can't just abandon our stations, right? We've got to be out there fighting for our people. And that means coming up with innovative ways to stretch 10 cents into $1. That means making sure that we are hearing people and reflecting their lived experience in the work that we're doing every day, that we're collaborating and lifting each other up and giving each other grace. It's going to happen, if it happens anywhere, at the local level. And we need all of you to be in that fight together.
So I'm going to open it up to questions, but I do have one more question, because Kamala Harris was just in Philadelphia yesterday on her book tour. And this is something that I've just thought about, and I'm thinking about it with you and with her. And when you are so immersed, you were the mayor for 4 years, and you were like, at the top of your game, the waters would part when you walked in the room, and everybody's genuflecting, and same thing with Kamala. Like, what is the mental and emotional shift that you have to go through when that's no longer there, when it's over?
It's a great question. And I can only speak from my experience. I have to say, when you are the mayor of a city like Chicago, you start creating this cemetery in your head for the loss, literally, of lives, and you have to figure out how you navigate all of that and where you put that every single day, and not having that very, very heavy burden that feels like it's not ever going away. Again, not having that on your heart is a relief. I mean, it's a relief. And I will say for me, right as I was leaving office, I learned that two dear family members, my mother and my oldest brother, had inoperable heart conditions. I ended up losing both of them. My brother at the end of 2023, my mother in early 2024. So a lot of my headspace for the first kind of 2 years was helping my family members leave this world, grieving that tremendous loss, because for those of you who lost a parent, and particularly your mother, I don't care how old your mom is, my mom was 95, you're not ready. You can tell yourself you may be, but you're not ready. So I'm still grieving those big losses in my life, but I feel like I'm kind of getting to the other side of it. And look, the reality is those deaths have taught me that life is precious, but not promised, and that you have to live your life in a way that brings you joy and happiness. So I don't do what I don't want to do anymore. And with due respect to maybe the parade organizers out there, I'm never walking in another parade for the rest of my life. But in seriousness, you have to find your joy. Being mayor was the greatest experience of my lifetime. There's a lot of things about it that I truly, genuinely miss, in particular, really trying to help people and seeing the immediate impact of what you can do. But there's a lot about it that I don't miss anymore. And I told you about the press, right? I still have a comms person, and some of the worst, most vicious people still reach out and, would Mayor Lightfoot? No, Mayor Lightfoot wouldn't fucking do anything for you. Sorry. So it gives me a freedom that I very much appreciate.
And there was a book, there was a book, The City is Up for Grabs, by Gregory Royal Pratt, he was the Chicago Tribune.
Yeah, he's
writer.
blocked
Yes.
forever.
That's, it's kind of a hit job, a little bit of a hit job. If there are no questions, I have more questions, but I think there are questions. Yes.
Hi, I'm Sara.
Yes.
Sarah Jimenez, Philadelphia Education Fund. Thank you so much for this conversation, Mayor Lightfoot. In the book Shadow by Bob Woodward, he examines how every president post-Watergate is reaction to the president before them. And that's why we have them. If you look at Philadelphia from 2016 to 2024, we had 3, then 6 wards vote for Donald Trump. Here you had 30-some vote in 2016, 100 precincts in 2024 voted for Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. Taking that as maybe some evidence of his comment about how every leader is really a reflection of the leader before them and a reaction, violent reaction to them, I wonder if you could reflect on what you may think is the reaction, what should we learn in terms of our leadership and what we're holding on to that created that violent reaction such that we can be better leaders in our municipal context?
So I think there's a couple of dynamics that reflect that. And one of the most interesting but disturbing developments in the city of Chicago from the November 2024 election was Donald Trump won a ward, the 50th ward on the far north side of our city, that is kind of evenly divided between the Orthodox community, the Orthodox Jewish community, and I'll call it the Muslim community, but it's Pakistanis, Indians, a lot of South Asians. They all, across those two big communities, voted for Donald Trump. And yeah, we are a very deep blue city, but we have certainly pockets of places that Trump did well, but the most mystifying is up there. Now, you know, having talked to members of that community, Orthodox community, voted him because of his stance on Israel. But I will never understand and stepping back from the Muslim community, I will never understand how black and brown folks voted for this man. I just won't, I don't get it. I really don't. And now you'll see popping up from time to time on social media, oh my goodness, he's doing the very damn thing he said he was going to do. He never made a secret of who he was, but I think, again, smarter people than I will write PhD thesis about this, but I think Donald Trump was able to really take, and continues to take advantage of winds that were blowing long before he came down the stairs, the escalators in 2015 and delivered his first racist rant as a presidential candidate. Our democracy is in crisis, and it has been for a while. I meant what I said before. There are too many people who simply don't understand how this all is supposed to work, right? When the founding fathers came together in Philadelphia, right? There are a lot of people who don't even know that happened, that are walking as Americans, as voters here today. So we are not educated about our history. We are not educated about how government works. And I will also say there are too many people that are in elected life for the wrong reasons. They're in it for themselves and not to serve the people. So what's happened over these last decade or so is the amount of people who are disconnected is going way up, and the number of people who vote is going way down. And so then you're talking to a smaller and smaller slice of the potential electorate. And let's face it, folks, hate sells. It sadly does. It is a motivating and organizing tactic that Donald Trump has been able to exploit to the hilts. You think about, and I'm probably going to get myself in trouble here, but I'm going to say it anyway, as Private Citizen Lightfoot. What's happened in a week plus since Charlie Kirk was murdered? I had a Baptist preacher sermon pop up in one of my Instagram feeds, and he said something that I thought was exactly right. We can abhor the death, but we don't need to celebrate the life. When you are a propagator of hate and division, but it's sold. Do you see the crowd of people at that, was it Utah Valley State, who came to hear this man who has said horrific things about everyone who isn't white, moneyed, and male? They bought it and loved it and couldn't get enough of it. So the rest of us who are not that, the purveyors of hate and division, we gotta have a louder voice. We can't just wring our hands and think logic is on our side. We have got to stand up and be the good that should be in all of us.
Yes. Next question.
There was so much hoopla going on about the National Guard and ICE coming here, and then all of a sudden, it pivoted. They went somewhere else. And so there's been a lot of talk about, what happened in Chicago to kind of shoo them away, for lack of a better term. Can you explain to us what happened?
Well, I mean, honestly, we don't know, right? And it could happen. We could walk outside today and Donald Trump change his mind, and it could happen. Here's what I think was going on. Donald Trump doesn't care about court. Legally, there was a very, very strong case that he would have lost in court. I don't think he cares about that because he believes that the Supreme Court will rubber stamp everything that he does, and frankly, with good reason, because we look at the rulings. Like when we live in a time now where the Supreme Court has said, oh yeah, you can racial profile, no problem, go ahead. We have to worry about that. I think that their polling showed that this is wildly unpopular. I think that the kind of galvanizing of persons and voices here in Chicago that resonated across the country, they started to see that showing up in polling, which is why they didn't come. And look, Donald Trump has said all kinds of things about Chicago for a really long time. The last time he was here as a candidate in 2016, he got run out of town. And we were ready to do the same thing again. But what has happened is this surge in ICE that, again, primarily out in the burbs, not in the city of Chicago itself. There unfortunately was a gentleman who was killed in a very controversial ICE traffic stop, where frankly the contemporaneous video shows that the ICE agents in the statement that was put out by ICE were lies, and we still don't have any transparency around what happened other than pieces of video here and there. And you know, as somebody who used to investigate police misconduct, I know that video is a snapshot but not a total answer. But I think their polling showed it would be a catastrophic mistake for them to come into a place like Chicago. It's the only thing that makes sense. So, but you never know till you know. And I don't think we're out of the woods yet. He threatened the same thing in the summer of 2019 into 2020. You know, I'm one I don't want to play this game of, oh, it's about violence. It's not. It never has been. The federal government is uniquely qualified to do certain things if they cared about violence, like send more prosecutors, send more agents, set up interstate gun trafficking task forces. There's a lot of things that they could do. Don't cut the ATF budget in half, right? Don't get rid of all the ATF inspectors who are holding the industry and gun dealers accountable. If you really cared about violence, there's things you could do and there's things you definitely wouldn't do, but not on the list is sending in the National Guard or the military.
Thank you so much.